Natividad. I'm president of the Global Summit of Women. Welcome everyone to this virtual session on post-COVID megatrends. We're coming to you from the Global Summit of Women, which is now celebrating its 30th anniversary of bringing women and some men together on issues concerning women in business and economics. Today, we're dealing with a topic that is on most people's mind. What will the world look like after this pandemic? And we can't even see when that will be, but we have a team of experts who will share with us what their prognosis is going forward in terms of our business lives. So let me introduce them to you. First, we have coming from Thailand, Patamat Chantarut, who is the head of IBM Thailand, and she's vice president as well of Indochina Development. And secondly, we have Marie Lollemont from Paris, where it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She is executive vice president of Nielsen Corporation that does a lot of consumer research. And then last but not least, we have Miki Susaka. She is, until recently, the global head of marketing for the renowned Boston Consulting Group, which is a management consulting company known to many of you. So, given the limited time that we have, let's start. Miki, tell us, what is the state of the economy that you see right now that we are in, and what will be the possible shape of recovery to the extent that you can predict it, since we don't know when it will end?
So thank you, Irene, for inviting me back to the Global Summit of Women. I remember our time together in Tokyo a few years ago, and I hope we'll be together soon. So you've asked a very big question, and I know I only have 10 minutes before my fellow panelists speak, so let me get to that right away. Let's see if I can move my slide. So the impact on the economy. Let me draw from our economists at the Boston Consulting Group. If you go to our website, there'll be plenty of articles. I love this visual of the girl on Wall Street and taking stock of the COVID recession. So we've all experienced an uncertain world, a terrible world in the last few months. I will say that indeed, though, the real and financial economies have diverged. It's interesting to me that the equity markets are already back. If you look at it from December 19 to where we were almost just about a month ago, and yet unemployment is still very high. So there is a disconnect in terms of what we're maybe feeling in terms of the economy and what's happening to what the folks at Wall Street believe. There's also another component that I look at in terms of, well, how good are we at predicting the future? I'm not an economist, I'm a business person, but what the economists tell me is that this is one of the most difficult economies to actually forecast. So what you see here is a trajectory from January to August in terms of various economic forecasts around the decline of GDP across the world. And you'll see the actual is around a minus 30–35%, but this is the biggest spread we've seen in terms of forecasts. And one thing that does give me hope is that good economies have a little bit of inflation. It looked like we weren't, but actually as of a few months ago now, we're actually seeing this green line that indicates the forward-looking inflation expectations picking up. So as gloomy as the world is, I think there's an undercurrent of hope that we will get through this. How long it will take, I think, is the big question on everyone's mind.
Well, thank you, Miki. But all of us during the lockdown and the semi-lockdown that we're in sort of behave differently. So what behaviors emerged during this period that influence buying decisions? And as a result of that, there are winners and losers in terms of industry. So can you share that with us?
Absolutely. Let me progress a few of my slides, and these will, I believe, be all available after our chat. The other pieces of data that I wanted to draw upon is our consumer sentiment research that we've been doing. We've been tracking as I think many of you know, across 25 plus markets, including the major economies around the world, monthly and consistently since March. And we see a couple of trends around who is indeed the post-COVID consumer. We've all now given up that this is a reality that's going to be here for a while. So we've moved away from fear to acceptance around the virus. It's interesting to me that this whole notion around community and national bonds have strengthened. On a positive note, I think consumers are looking to reinvest, commit back to their local brands. In India, it's 35%. Governments that have done well have seen the highest approval ratings ever. There's a cocooning effect, even in a market like China, which, as all of us seen, have recovered probably most quickly out of the whole COVID situation. Even Chinese consumers are not back to their usual activity levels and are in fact investing back into at-home type activities. Winning and losing categories, let me show you what those are in a minute. I think it's also interesting. We've been talking about health and wellness forever. This is a health crisis. And so there's a recommitment to all of us taking care of ourselves. And finally, digitalization, which I know my fellow panelists like Padma from IBM will talk much more articulately about. But there's been a massive articulation around the digital economy and how we consume. And if I may, Irene, let me just show you just a little bit of data. Let's see. This is the,
we can't
what?
understand this. Okay, go ahead.
This one, I think you'd like this slide, if I may. So this is looking at net spending in February, right as the crisis started. And the axis going top to bottom is the difference between how people were feeling in April versus August. The upper right-hand categories, and these are just a selection of, I've just given the global audience you have, I've picked a few markets and emerging markets to say who are the winners. And it's no surprise to you all that things like health supplements or watching videos at home, keeping ourselves clean and safe in terms of household care products are seeing an uptick in terms of positive consumer sentiment and spend intent. I find the upper left quadrant also interesting because you see people on scooters and bikes. I was talking to a bicycle company CEO who can't make enough of these things. And I think the form of mass transit to private transit has really increased. And so there's that element, although, and then there's of course, alcohol stands out in terms of us drinking at home as opposed to outside. So again, different categories have experienced different growth rates during this time. And some of these trends will stick. The categories that have suffered the most have seen declines of up to 30% or more, are going to slowly have to figure out a way to get out of that quadrant. But again,
the pink one, is that the
yes,
pink?
The pink one is the one. So you'll see things like, you know, going to the movies, eating out at restaurants. I think this is all of the activities we stop. Interestingly, things like cosmetics is on the upper left, bottom left. But in fact, taking care of the Global Summit of Women, skincare has actually done quite well. Eye makeup has done better than lips because, you know, of the mask wearing. So again, within each of those categories, there's some interesting ups and downs that we've observed.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know Padma will take care of addressing digital tools, but, you know, what have you seen sort of overall in terms of the role that digital tools play and the impact on economies going forward?
I think we have seen a tremendous increase in digital adaptation in every market. I was with a retail CEO today who said that he has seen digital acceleration in terms of e-commerce in the last 5 months that he had originally planned for the next 5 years. So there's been a massive adoption at the consumer level, but also at a B2B level. And so this slide, again, just taking a selection of emerging markets, show a huge growth in first-time online shoppers across these 6 countries I've picked and other kind of digital activities. But it's not only how we consume, it is also companies are using digital to accelerate the way they serve consumers, accelerate the way they reduce costs to decrease the cost to serve, particularly when economies are shut down, and how to sort of survive the period where we're all fighting through the virus until we see, hopefully, a vaccine solution and a new normal in the months to come, hopefully soon next year.
Hopefully. Thank you, Mickey. And you're going to make these slides available to
Yes.
everyone, true?
Yes, indeed.
Wonderful. Okay, so hold for a while and let's hear from Marie Lolma from Nielsen. They have been conducting global surveys of consumers. And so my first question to you, Marie, what were the economic shocks that consumers suffered during the pandemic, whether they are individuals or institutional or countries? And what's the impact of those shocks on consumer behavior?
Yes, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Actually, I can't move the slides. Here we go. So there are specific recession shocks that we have observed, and they are all around the world happening. And these recession shocks are going to have some consequences on how the consumers and the citizens are going to be able to evolve in the future of this uncertainty. So clearly we've seen economic contractions with significant differences depending on the sector. Mickey highlighted some of the areas where consumptions continued and consumption stopped. We know that the tourism and hospitality and retail and entertainment, and to some extent the real estate, have suffered differently, and we'll look at that. But also the consequences are on how the public money is being spent. So governments all around the planet are focusing on homeland with some consequences on how much they can continue to deploy in terms of investment outside and foreign investment in some countries that they are used to. But also how long can governments really pull that money into the countries. I think in March, a statistic said that in April, 9 trillion of public help was directed to businesses in big suffering, as well as to the most vulnerable of the citizens. That cannot continue at the same speed, which explains also the uncertainty in terms of where import-export restrictions are going to go. Reallocation of some businesses. We keep hearing about the production of health and medicines going back into the country to create the autonomy that people are expecting. But this has some deep consequences in terms of personal as well as public debts, with some expected changes in terms of how consuming will move forward, and the ability of consumers to reallocate their spend. Another interesting trend that we are seeing is actually what we call reverse urbanization. And that's linked to work from home, first of all, but also the fact that citizens wanted to, the one that could afford it, wanted to leave the cities and started to buy in the suburb in order to have a different type of life and maybe being away from public transportations, which can also have some consequences on both the car industry, maybe in a positive way short term, as well as on the public transportation and how this is going to be financed if the work from home continues beyond what both companies are saying, which is beyond mid of July next year. So, you know, Irene, you asked this question, restrictions that could happen and which one are the sectors that really have been damaged. We all could see that travel and tourism has been heavily hit. For sure, they represent in some countries a significant part of the GDP. And the fact that no travel, or at least no global travel, and to some extent no wide national travel, people tend to stay local, have some consequences and ripple effects, domino effects on many industries, not only the airplane industry, but also the restaurants, the hotels. And coming soon, also some effects on car renting, but also luxury product, because most of the luxury industry, a big part of the luxury industry is actually being bought in brick and mortar stores by tourists in many countries. So these exchange have stopped, and the impact on employment, the impact on various sectors is expected to increase. I'm sure what I want to mention on the airplane industry is that the ripple effect is not only on the industry itself, it's also on the supplier of the spare parts, so of those big industries. And maybe some of you have heard what the Boeing CEO said, as well as Airbus. They said they need to save their suppliers, which are very often small and middle-sized industry companies, because otherwise they will not be able to rebound when the time comes to global travel. So not only they have to save themselves, but they also, and their clients, but they also have to save their supply chain. So this is not a one thing. This is a whole dimension, and the crisis has accelerated the fact that people are looking from the start to the bottom. So from the production of things to the consumer.
Well, the pandemic, Marie, showed us economics, writ large right in front of us. So given, unemployment is a big component of the pandemic, were there groups that were hurt more than others?
Yes, absolutely. Young workforce are being hit harder. Here on this slide, you see the proportion of young, and the unemployment was already higher with the young generation. And the pandemic has hurt them even more, which is a bigger issue for the planet, because these young generation are the future of the consumers, they are the future of the economy, they are the future of who's buying, who's building, who's creating wellness for their countries. And the fact that they are right now and for some years being hit so hard is an issue. If you compare to 2008, it took, and the crisis then, it took about 10 years to come to back to normal level. And this one is a big hit, absolutely.
Yeah. And this generation will, because there's no money for them, will delay marriage, acquiring homes, acquiring cars, and so on. So this is really scary. So, let's just end this session with, so what's the buying behavior of consumers going forward? And more important, because we have a lot of business people on this call, what can businesses do to re-engage consumers?
Yes, so we observed very different circumstances depending on the wellness of the consumers. We classify them, and this is now really polarized. So we classify them in terms of constrained consumers, which have seen and will see their income drop, and will have to reposition their spending and their behaviors according to what they have. And we call it the insulated consumers that are actually changing their behaviors, but because of from home and from less traveling. So if we focus on the constrained consumers, this is expected with all the consequences that we know in terms of income and ability to spend, but also a need to change the labor allocation, where they can work from and how they can find some jobs. We see an increase in debt, and we see an increase in their focus on essential goods and what is essential to them continuing experiencing life. So significant consequences on what basket will be, and we track that around the world, and this is common to all countries for that type of consumers. That's what we are expecting. They will reduce what they buy in food, beverage, health and beauty, etc., and they will prioritize meals, real basic needs over snacks and treats and enjoyment type of things. It's going to have some strong consequences in terms of what categories will pick up and how brands need to actually activate this. Because there will be in a survival mode, we will also see some very strong change in the way where they buy. We spoke about digital retail picking up. Click and collect is a trend across the world, but also these consumers will focus on more traditional trade because they can buy smaller packs and they can also have some facilities in terms of payment. So this is also the emerging of the return of smaller close trade that can provide security in terms of purchase versus the big stores. So that's also a key trend. And these have some very strong implications for the brands and for the retailers in how they need to adapt the whole value chain, what they can offer, how they produce it so that the price meets the expectation. When they focus on needs, they need to focus on basics, things that can deliver health, security, and feed. And at the same time, they need to reevaluate their supply chain. So we are expecting from these consumer needs, we're expecting the whole industry to change and transform. And digitalization is going to play a bigger role here. So, so definitely that's the focus.
Thank you, Marie. So speaking of digitalization, let's move to Patama Chantaruk of IBM. So, you know, we spent a lot of time, many of us, looking at screens during this period. So what digital tools, what tech tools in general were used mostly during this pandemic period, and what does it mean, you know, going forward? So let's take a look at that first.
Okay, thank you, Irene. So we talked, you know, we heard what Mickey and Marie talk about the whole situation during the COVID. A lot of people has been talking about digital transformation for years. I call COVID is, you know, a turning point for digital transformation. A lot of people might look at it as a tragedy, but a lot of the business look at it as a powerful force of the disruption. You saw what happened, right, in terms of needs and trend emerged during COVID-19. I think Marie touched and called the insulated consumer. You see the new normal consumer behavior. You know, I love to touch things, see things before I buy, right? And a lot of retailers start using technology such as AI as a way to look at the behavior of the consumer. But guess what? During COVID, right, the behavior, you know, all the attribute that you think you know about your consumer, now you don't. People no longer buying because of emotion alone. They only buy things if they need it. You know, the fact that, Irene, you just mentioned that now we're staring at the screen and look at, you know, all the things that we can no longer touch and try, you know, but we have to make decisions. So all of that, you know, consumer behavior has changed. New way to work. You know, we here in Thailand, you know, 80% of our employees still working from home. You're forced to use the technology, you know, at length. I never thought that, you know, billions of students, you know, won't go to school. They have to study online. There's a lot of challenges in terms of new ways to work, even though it's not new. It is, you know, the culture, the corporate culture, whether or not, you know, you allow employees to have access to the information, or even the student and teacher. Do you have the content ready to be used online? whether or not the student has, you know, a laptop, or they have to use the same laptop as their parents using for work. You know, all this needs and trend emerged during COVID-19. But most importantly, I think, you know, there's a lot of impact on the supply chain. A lot of people call it, you know, supply chain 4.0. What happened in Wuhan, right? A lot of company, particularly manufacturing, even though they're not in China, start to close down because the parts and, you know, all the equipment produced in China. But last but not least, when, you know, during 9 months, you start seeing government starts sending out stimulus check online. But guess what? This is the opportunity for hackers to pretend to be you and start picking up your stimulus check in the mail, or you know, they start stealing you know, the information, given that the digital activities have increased. So now the technology that the client has been using, you know, has to start shifting. I go through using the example of some of the clients that start using, you know, the technology to handle the amount of digital activities. We talk about, you know, one of the client, Vodafone. This, you know, client of ours not using the technology during the COVID, but prior to the COVID, to handle, you know, the request or the call coming in from the client. It is the first chatbot. I call it the conversational AI. What does that mean? It helps handle not only the question, but manage to actually take over from human agent the low value activities. So I'll touch and get to that, you know, in a minute, where humans are. But what happened is that during COVID, with the amount of calls that now being picked up by Toby, which is the conversational AI or chatbot behind the scene, you know, it helped resolve the customer query 70%, and that allow the human agent or the service agent to do the value added service on top of that. And given that the technology being used now with AI, they start recognizing the behavior of the consumer on the spot, and prove that, you know, during COVID, Irene, you know, the customer satisfaction has been increased as well.
So wait, Fatima. So are you saying that we're now going to see the death of, you know, brick stores and malls, and we're only going to see online education and online entertainment? I mean, I have to tell you, this is not pleasing a lot of people, including me, you know. So I think people change behavior, consumer behavior, but they think it's not permanent. But do you think that there are long-term implications of this change in behavior?
It is in a way, Irene, because the behavior of the consumer now, the click and collect, you know, or, you know, purchasing things online, right? Or even now you can actually sit in front of the computer and just like you going to the concert. So where's the humans at? That's a great question, right? In this case, Vodafone shifting the human agent to handle the complicated question. So keep in mind, a lot of questions that coming through, you know, online, or even the client pick up the phone and call. Often that you spend, you know, half an hour waiting for somebody to actually get to the answer for you. So it's generic question. So when I'm looking at the technology, you know, the technology will replace the process, particularly the repetitive process, but leave the human being to actually focusing on, you know, the complicated question, things that need to handle emotionally, because of course the technology cannot do that, right? So in this case, what they found that 70% of the query being handled by the bot. And also the client learned that, you know, they can get to the answer even quicker. So that's, you know, the whole story. They're not, it is not totally replace human. That's what I'm saying.
Well, but robots are being increasingly used, for instance, in Japan, where Mickey is. You know, they're greeters, they work in supermarkets, they're cleaning the floors, they are replacing inventory. So it does, that's great because we're in a world where contactless is, you know, valued. But it does worry me because those used to be people jobs, even if they're at the lower end. So, you know, the big question is, for a lot of people, will digital tools, tech tools replace human beings and increase unemployment even above what we're suffering now?
Well, you can say that too. So that's one of the reasons why even us today, right, we make sure that the human being never stop learning, and also looking at, you know, the area where, you know, the technology cannot replace what we do as a human. So you're talking about, you know, in Japan, I like to also using this robot. You know, another good example in terms of the chatbot, and it is a great use between the technology and the human. So if you look at, you know, what Rakuten has, they have over 90 million consumer or the customer, and more than half of them today being taken care of AI chatbot. What does it mean? I'm not saying that all 100% has to be handled by the machine. There's still a lot of human touch when it comes to, you know, emotion, when it comes to, you know, the quicker service. But what I'm saying is that in the back end, Irene, you have the technology that can help human to perform better tasks. In this case, what Rakuten is using the robot or AI for, if I'm an agent, when client call, I know exactly who this client is and what services I should consider asking the client to consider looking. There's a cross sale, upsell that human can do. But on the generic information, leave that to the bot, because you can get an accurate answer. You reduce the waste time that the client's going through, and imagine the digital activities that increase today. But most importantly, it actually helps in terms of the Rakuten business down to the level of logistics, where normally when you use human to do the task, they have to deal with a lot of process on the back end. This is a mix between machine and human, Irene. So yes, at some point we can avoid that technology will replace some of the process that humans are doing. But I look at it as a combination to make sure that you provide a premium service to the customer. And this is the good two example that I like to share from the customer engagement today.
Thank you. Thank you, Patama. I think you gave us food for thought. I'm still scared and as are many people, about a lot of the processes and procedures, that can be answered or done automatically, because there are lots of women in those jobs. So that worries me, at the lower end of the spectrum. But what you said before, we have to continue learning, and upskilling. That's the future, but some people don't have the resources to upskill as well. So anyway, so that's the new world that we're entering. Thank you so much, Patama. We're now open for questions. And I see we have Germany, a question from Germany.
Yes, hello. This is Ursula Schwarzenbart from Germany. I'm head of talent development and the chief diversity officer at Daimler in Stuttgart in Germany. And I would like to say, first of all, thank you for the excellent presentations. And I would also like to raise a question for Mickey. Mickey, if I look into your forecast you were presenting, as well into the unemployment rate we are expecting, and even if we are accepting that we are in a health crisis with COVID-19 now, and we have to deal with it, and if I add the discussion Irene and Patama were just having about the technology, what is your perception on how is the world of work going to be changed or involved through this crisis?
That's a very big question.
Oh, yes.
So I don't have a crystal ball, Ursula, but I do think that if, again, if I rely on our economists, if we look at the overall economy, the one thing that COVID has accelerated is the acceleration of the size of the service economy versus the goods economy. And then this is looking at it over, 5 decades. And if you look at relative employment, as Irene and Patama was talking about, COVID has hit us women more significantly because there are more women in some of those service sectors like frontline jobs and retail and whatnot that were hurt. So that is an issue. I think on the positive news side, the goods manufacturers, and I know there are many, that work in, hard goods like automotive, those industries have made a lot of effort to become more efficient. And while they are shrinking in terms of the relative share of the economy they contribute to, their productivity has increased. Again, as somebody said earlier, one of my fellow panelists, I think this unfortunate COVID situation has accelerated the trend and the need for the service economy to also become efficient. So we may be aided by technology. I did see a statistic that said in terms of OECD countries, most markets will actually have a labor shortage. I come from Japan. We don't have enough people. We're not having enough babies. We welcome more people coming to our country. And so if you look at it in aggregate, the only major economy that will actually have a people surplus is India. China is aging as fast as we are. So again, right now, it feels really hard in the new normal, whether it's 12 to 18 months or you take whatever forecast the economists are talking about. I do think there will be a recovery because good talent is hard to find, and we're at least half the solution as women.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Let's see, Mexico, we have a call from Mexico.
Yes, thank you. Good morning and good evening to everyone. Thank you for having us with these great mega topics that you brought to us. This is a question for Marie. According to the actual status quo, in terms of the currently available tools at hand, the access to goods via online, to support a partial return to activities in the following 2 years, what do you believe is the answer in terms of reaching out to customers that do not possess the necessary technology to enter online consumer solutions, but that still constitute an economic force that cannot be ignored?
This is actually a great question. This is very concrete on how brands and retailers can reach their consumers in a new environment. And specifically for what we call the constrained consumers, which we know are increasing around the world. So in this case, direct to consumer remains the opportunity. And it's back into a previous world, I would say, with mail, with also something that's developing, which is friend, neighbors, helping each other in terms of collectively going to supply and going to stores. And this is where we see the re-emergence of small stores that are proximity stores that will actually be able to capitalize on the fact that they have consumers around them in a very different way. Also, very interesting things that's happening during COVID is the lack of advertising on TV. So there has been a tremendous drop of advertising on TV because consumers couldn't go to stores, so brands had to reallocate their budget and also had to stop. But what we observe in Nielsen is that this is changing. With the lockdown being finished in many countries, this is actually changing, and TV advertising, which we can call mass advertising, is going back into getting traction, whilst the digital advertising continue to speed up. And in the mass advertising, there is one dimension that is developing, which is through any connected TV. So more customized, personalized, regionalized type of advertising. A little bit like you get in, you used to get in cinema, where you had your local brand or your local store advertising in your home cinema. This is, the technology is allowing this step by step to also happen. So it's kind of traditional advertising in a very structured and modernized way.
Great. Local is good. Is your message, right?
Yes, local can win again.
Well, we're not out of the pandemic lockdown. We're in semi-lockdown here in the US. So there's a call here from my country, the US.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Rohini Anand from the United States. I'm former Senior Vice President and Global Chief Diversity Officer at Sodexo. And my question is for Fatima. It was interesting that the common thread in all of these conversations were around the digital transformation. And Fatima, you talked about the new normal, consumer behavior and employee behavior using digital, and that we're now forced to use technology and it's replacing some of the repetitive tasks. So my question is, how is this going to impact human interaction? We're seeing a rise in mental health cases due to this sort of isolation of human beings, due to limited human interaction, and particularly around vulnerable populations, particularly with women. So can you just speak, and I think, Marie spoke a little bit about the community piece, but can you speak to, how that will impact human interaction? What do you see and, how do you project that?
Yeah, in a big way. So thank you for the question. I'll use, the learning, the online learning as an example, right? So when 3 billion students forced not to go to school, and the teacher needs to start looking at whether or not the content that they normally use in a face-to-face environment needs to turn into the online content. You're talking about the new skill that the teacher has to start to adapt. How you can get the student to pay attention to you. Particularly, you don't know how the other end will do. When you have a class online, right, the student might end up doing something else. They can do multitasking. So in terms of the human, I feel bad. When in the country, for example, the technology is not easily adopted. You still need to talk about 5G, for example. right? You need to talk about, whether or not the infrastructure is ready, whether or not the content is ready, whether or not the skill of the teacher in terms of teaching online. All of that, force people to change the behavior or even the policy. I touch a little bit in terms of when you talk about the remote working. Not every company allow every employees to access to the information online. So things like that needs to be changed, needs to be adopted quickly. So a lot of that's the reason why I call COVID is the accelerator in terms of driving digital transformation in not only for the consumer, but also, government has to adopt to the digital transformation. Corporation has to do the same. So we actually seen a lot of new skill, being put in place, particularly at IBM. We make sure that our employees know how to handle, the situation where you have to engage with the client by phone using, WebEx technology. You can't, you have to make sure that you understand and engage the client, without seeing their reaction, right? So skill like that, and policy needs to also be adapted. So yes, a lot of change. I look at COVID as the accelerator to the digital transformation.
Thank you, Fatima, and thank you to all the questioners. Time is running short. I have to tell you, one of the things we all discovered during this period is that the screen is a very fragile substitute for human contact. I never knew how great it is to hug somebody when you can't hug anybody, or even shake hands with a person. We had asked for, as women, flex time to be able to work from home so we can integrate work and family. Well, now we've had too much integration, and it has created a kind of distance bias. If you're low on the totem pole, not being seen across other parts of a company really hurts. And so there are pluses and minuses with all of this, all of these changes. So, but we have to remain flexible as human beings. A year from now, hopefully there will be a vaccine and we can meet together in Bangkok, October 14 to 16 at the Global Summit of Women physically, because there's no substitute for the energy and the dynamics of being together, and listening to experts like you, and then being able to go to you in person and say, you were terrific, Fatima, you were terrific, Marie, and of course, Mickey, always. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You will have more, you will hear more from the Global Summit of Women to you. Thank you.
Thank you.